Hello, multi-minions of the mission, and thank you to Druss the Legend, or D-R-U-S-S. It could be Druss. I think it's Druss. It's Druss the Legend. I'll stick with that for that malt mention. Welcome, malt mates, to the Bothy. I'm Ralphie, somewhere in the Irish Sea, and this is Ralphie Review 899. Extras. I'm talking about branding. I've just reviewed a bottle of Balblair 15-year-old, single malt, Highlands of Scotland. Very good, recommend it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have, because something happened recently which tainted my relationship with Balblair, and it wasn't nothing serious. In fact, many people could say it's relatively trivial. But it's not trivial to me, because when we connect with alcohol, we're connecting with a chemical in the form of ethanol, which triggers our emotions. Now, if you walk into any bar anywhere in the world, half an hour before closing time, you will hear raised voices, much laughter, a few tears. You may even see a few punches getting thrown as people get smacked in the face. And the reason is that people are not sober. They've been drinking and they're affected by alcohol, and in particular their normal social sober reactions and responsiveness is dramatically shifted due to the consumption of the alcohol, which means they are driven by irrationality, a lack of common sense, and their emotions. Boring people will become more boring. Interesting people will generally become more interesting. It is just the nature of alcohol. And it's universal. Any country, anywhere in the world, when people are drinking alcohol, they start to get more emotional and they respond emotionally. And when we're consuming alcohol, we become more emotionally connected to what we're consuming, particularly when we're consuming any modest quantity, because we don't have to be drunk, just a few glasses, and you start to have that complex emotional response, which is driven by reason and rationality and relative sobriety, but it's a real melting point of all of the ways that we perceive things, rational and irrational. And that's just what drinking whiskey is. And this is why when we bond with a particular brand of any spirit, whether it be rum, bourbon, cognac, or Scotch whiskey, or rye, or whatever, it tends to be like bonding with a person. There's this strong emotional aspect to it. And when suddenly, for reasons that are beyond our control, whether it be a sudden price increase or a complete representation of a familiar brand, our response is not so much a rational response, but a rational and an emotional response. We get irritated, we may even get angry, we certainly get frustrated. And that's what happened to me with Balblair. Now, Balblair is a whiskey that in the past I've always come back to on a relatively regular basis. In fact, previously in my reviews, including the last one, I've now reviewed Balblair's 9 times, whether reviewing a specific whiskey or if you want to include my love letter to Balblair, when I included it as an extras. But I'm not buying Balblair so much now, and it's down to the presentation. You can clearly see the difference in presentation, which has been made more complex by the fact that the boxing and the packaging has changed as well. If it was just the bottle, it wouldn't be so noticeable, and I'm going to show you this. But it's the actual boxing of it, and then there was a price increase as well, particularly in the older versions. So with the older box, it's got this little bits of magnets. It's kind of, I at a point where the cardboard box and the wastefulness of it and the cost of it wasn't such an issue on our malt radars as it is now. But now we're looking at fancier presentation, asking ourselves, actually, how much does that add to the cost of my whiskey? And when you taste the whiskey, you say, how much, if that money for that box had been spent in the casks, how much better would my whiskey be? This is the articulate questions that modern maltmates are asking. Now, have a look at the other box. The other box is significantly different. Different colour, different typeset for the Balblair. And when I bring out the bottle, they're both different ages, so forget the age calculation. They're actually, I'll put them literally side by side. As you can see, there's virtually no change between the bottles themselves. I'll hold them both forward so you can see them. They're virtually identical. And the actual wording of Balblair has changed very little on the label. The shape of the label's changed. There's the addition on the label of a second bottom label giving the information which used to be tucked around the side of the older label. But really, apart from some superficial differences on the stoppers, which I'll show you as well. There we go, that's it. All of which, by the way, costs significant amounts of money. To buy just an ordinary bottle now is heading towards, with a label on it, it's £3.50. That's just an ordinary, basic, good quality bottle with a basic label and a cork and a metal seal over it. That's about £3.50. If there's anything fancy about the label, like the lettering sticking up or gold metallic colours on it, you're looking at £4 for the bottle. But when you add the box, you can start to double it. And again, you ask yourself, well, what would this whiskey smell and taste like if instead of spending the money in the box, which gets discarded, and by the way, let's not kid ourselves here, maltmates. When we say recycled, we're putting it in a recycling bin, but that does not mean to say it's getting recycled. It just basically means that it's out of our responsibility because it's out of our sight and we don't care what happens to it really, because as far as we're concerned, we've got the virtue signalling of having recycled. Use the recycle bin. But then you find out through unofficial media that in fact stuff that gets sent off for recycling can often end up as landfill because it's not recycled, because there's not enough profit in it. Things are not straightforward. So here you have significant changes in the containers, nominal changes in the bottle, but noticeable changes on the labels in the bottle. And all this builds up to basically define what is a rebranding. Now, bear in mind the cost of this, the cost of the meetings to make the decision, the cost of hiring the consultants to design the colours and the templates, the artists, the advisors, doing away with old labels, because you may have a stock of them, then ordering the new labels, then in your bottling plant, having to go through the process of rejigging how you apply the labels, if they've changed shape and changed size, because machinery needs adjusted and that costs money. Then you've got the corks themselves, the stoppers, the drilling into the corks to give that effect. That costs money. Thank goodness, I mean, if they changed the bottles, that too would cost money. And this all adds up. And what's the incentive to the distillers to do this? Is they want to basically make over, it's like a kitchen makeover. They feel that people have got a bit lackadaisical, a bit bored with the old version, and they want to dress it up so as to create the illusion that you've got a new, better quality product that's been newly presented. With Balblair, this isn't really the case. The whisky itself actually hasn't changed much at all. Although the older aged bottlings have now significantly jumped up in price, and I totally get it. But a rebranding costs a lot of money, and it either works or it doesn't. Now, when you start to look more objectively at the Scotch whisky scene, you'll notice that some brands get rebranded and then the conversation online turns quite negative and hostile. Great example is Benromach. Now, I believe that Benromach rebranded because they felt that their style of their whisky, and it's just purely my opinion, maltmates, the style of their whisky was too dry, a little bit too astringent, a little bit too demanding for the modern palate, and therefore they wanted to sweeten up everything across the board. Not completely, just subtly, to make it more accessible. And to help with that accessibility, they wanted the branding to be equally as accessible too. So they went for these bolder primary colours, red, everybody spots red, so that when they take their bottle out of a traditional spirit speciality shop where subtle branding is not an issue, because you're dealing with informed customers. And then they put their brand, is because they're trying to get the brand out in more and more volume. And then they put it into somewhere like travel retail, which is full of bright lights and blingy boxes of all big brands. And therefore, when you've got a tasteful brand, it's actually going to look a bit dull, because everything around it is that much brighter under the brighter lighting in the brighter sanitized environment, where you don't just have one or two of the boxes, you have hundreds of boxes all stacked up on the shelf, and it's saying special offer, 20% off, buy now, show your boarding pass, etc, etc. And also when you go online as well, or if you go into a supermarket, because where the venue of sale is changing more, and this is what's happening, subtly, tastefully branded whiskies, which look fine in a traditional whisky shop or at a distillery, they look great, look amazing, now under the harsh lights of the internet, say in Amazon, or in the harsh lights of a supermarket like Tesco in the UK, they're looking a little bit non-blingy. And when you're looking to reach out and sell your product beyond the dedicated, informed whisky customer, you need to bling things up a bit. And this is what backfires if it's done badly. And to be honest, I think Benromach made a mess of it. They could have done it a little more subtly. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of distilleries who have subtly rebranded their whisky over the years and you never even noticed, because they got it right. They did it correctly. Laphroaig, Ardbeg, Glenfiddich. Glenfiddich are the masters of rebranding, because it's when you look at auction, go and have a look at the auction site like scotchwhiskyauctions.com and look at the old bottles from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. They have changed. The shape of the bottles changed. The shape of the labels changed. But you barely even noticed, because it's been done in installments and subtly in such a way that because it hasn't changed, really, the impact and identifiability of the brand has remained universal and timeless. And Glenfiddich have done this so well. And Laphroaig do this so well, even when they're bottling poor quality malts such as in Laphroaig Select, which is I cannot believe that it's like a Swiss watch producer producing, saying, we've got all this equipment, we've got all these resources, how can we produce, alongside our £10,000 brand watches, how can we produce a watch for £100? You see with Dalmore, for goodness sake, with the Dalmore flask, 50-year-old Dalmore, 60-year-old Dalmore, £60,000 a bottle, bling, 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 bling. And yet the same distillery is allowing their product to be bottled for a supermarket as a budget brand. Serious mixed messages. Very few industries do that. If you're going to produce quality, stick to quality and presenting quality, because this causes market confusion when it becomes legitimate online conversation. And the conversation online is the one that really matters now, not anywhere else. But you look at Laphroaig, the black and white, you can go right back to a bottle that, sure, it was a fake, but it went on sale, a late 19th century, early 20th century bottling. And you look at it and you just immediately see it's Laphroaig. Just the label, the colour, the layout, even the font. It's not another whisky, it's only Laphroaig. And with Glenfiddich, it's exactly the same. With your standard, particularly the 12-year-old Glenfiddichs. I know that they've been doing some fancy packaging in order to appeal to the collectors who want that bling. Fair play to them, because the collectors don't mind paying the premium for the fancy box, because for them the whisky remains in the box because it's part of the package. But for the drinker, it's about the bottle and its contents. And sure, if you have a box, you can put the whisky in it and it's protected from sunlight. But the problem is, if you have a box on a windowsill, it's going to heat up, right? Due to the sunlight heating the box, which will then heat the contents inside the box. It's just better, whether your bottle of whisky is in a box or not in a box, keep it in a cool, dark cupboard away from direct light, period. It's just going to make your whisky last longer. And so there you have it. That's my opinion. With Balblair, the rebranding has been nominal in the bottle but dramatic in the boxes. So let's put the boxes out the way. The negative impact is just that much less, isn't it? Thank goodness they kept the bottle. Thank goodness Balblair, and all credit to them, they kept the integrity level of the bottling. See if they drove and dropped to 43% like Glengoyne does. And I mean, Glengoyne is a classic example of a whisky that can't possibly reach full respectability. It'll never be a 5-star whisky while you're engaging in basic bottlings. It needs to be integrity bottling so you're nowhere. You're just nowhere. And fortunately, I think Benromach, like Balblair, is recovering from a mixed reception, bad rebranding, for the simple reason that they kept the contents integrity. And by the way, heaven help any distillery now that rebrands and then lowers the volume of the content. You're going to get a lot of hot conversation and bad press online. People do not like it. People don't like it when a successfully established integrity brand of single malt whisky is downgraded. And if you want evidence of that, just go and ask Glendronach. Simple as that. I'm Ralphie. Hope you've enjoyed this little monologue, this little bump along conversation that I'm having here in the Bothy. It's just to give you additional peripheral information that ultimately helps you understand when you're in a position, being informed, to buy better quality spirits. And it's not just single malt whisky. I bought some rum recently and it was stunningly good. Absolutely stunningly good. And I'm going to review it at some point before the year's out. It's just that good, and I just want to mention it and just share it's not about single Scotch whisky anymore. It's about global spirits, quality spirits. We're seeing more of them. They are becoming available. And if you're into whisky, you will not fail but to be impressed by the quality of some other spirits when they're properly presented, because you have your experience with Integrity Scotch whisky as a direct and immediate point of reference. I'm Ralphie in the Bothy, waving bye-bye.